Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du, fa'uzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qala Allahu ta'ala fil Qur'anil Hakim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Yarfa'illahu allazina amanu minkum wallazina utul ilma darajat. Wallahu bima ta'maluna khabir. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Qala Allahu ta'ala fil Qur'anil Hakim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. وَلَقَدْ جِئْنَاهُمْ بِكِتَابٍ فَصَّلْنَاهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ هُدًى وَرَحْمَةً لِقَوْمٍ يُؤْمِنُونَ. صدق الله العظيم. The first verse which I recited translates as follows: Allah will exalt those of you who believe and those who are given knowledge to high ranks. And this is chapter 58, Al-Mujādilah, verse 11. And the second short verse which I recited translates as follows: And certainly we have brought them a book which we make clear with knowledge, a guidance and a mercy for a people who believe. And this is chapter 7, Al-Araf, verse 52. I'm continuing with the topic of 2 weeks ago of the importance of knowledge as stressed by the Holy Quran. The first verse which I recited indicates that those believers are raised by Allah to high ranks who have knowledge. Their faith is not merely believing what they've been told to believe, or believing without ever having thought about it. Their faith is supported by the knowledge they have acquired. They recognize the truth of the faith by means of their knowledge. The second verse states that in the Quran itself, Allah has explained its teachings by pointing to knowledge, and that is how the Quran becomes a guidance and mercy for those who believe in it by means of that knowledge. When the famous Imam Bukhari compiled the sayings and acts of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, which were reported by those who saw the Holy Prophet, when he compiled them into one collection, and he did this work 1200 years ago. He organized the reports by subject, and for each subject he has a section which is called, in fact, a book, but it is actually a section. The first book in his collection is about how revelation started coming to the Holy Prophet and in what manner it came to him. The second book is about what the Holy Prophet said regarding faith and matters of belief in Islam. And the third book deals with what the Holy Prophet said about knowledge. And by adopting this sequence, Bukhari has pointed out that the basis of Islam is the revelation which came to the Holy Prophet. That is the basis. The next basic point is, what are we required to believe in Islam? And after that, the next point is the importance of knowledge. Now we may ask, on what grounds did Bukhari decide that the importance of knowledge comes next, immediately after, next to declaring faith in Islam? If you look at the beginning of his book about knowledge, book 3, he has given a heading right at the beginning called The Superiority of Knowledge. And under this heading, he quotes the verse which I recited at the start of this khutbah. Allah will exalt those of you who believe and those who are given knowledge to high ranks. And he follows this verse by quoting another verse which I dealt with in my previous khutbah of 2 weeks ago. And that verse was the prayer, "My Lord, increase me in knowledge." From these 2 verses, Bukhari concluded that in Islam, knowledge is next in importance to faith. So this is not a new interpretation we are giving in this modern age to these verses of the Quran about the high place of knowledge. But Bukhari presented the same conclusion 1200 years ago. A mistaken idea has arisen that when knowledge is mentioned in the Quran or in Hadith, it means religious knowledge only. According to this wrong idea, in the verse, for example, "My Lord, increase me in knowledge," the wrong idea is that we're only asking for our knowledge relating to the religion of Islam to be increased, such as on the issues of its beliefs, teachings, and practices. And again, according to the same wrong idea, the sources of knowledge are only the Islamic books and texts, such as the Holy Quran and its commentaries and hadiths and books of Islamic law. But it is clear from many verses of the Quran that knowledge refers to all branches of knowledge relating to the world around us, including all the various sciences, history, medicine, psychology, etc. And the Holy Quran tells us that there are signs in the creation of the world around us for those people who possess the power of intellect and understanding. It says that these are the people, in the words of the Quran, it says these are the people who remember Allah standing and sitting and lying on their sides and reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth. Chapter 3, verse 191. So there are signs in the creation of this world for such people possessing the power of intellect. There is also another kind of knowledge whose importance is stressed in the Quran. It is accurate knowledge of events around us. The Holy Quran says, and I quote a verse in translation, "But if any news of security or fear comes to them, they spread it about. And if they had referred what they heard, the report, if they had referred it to the messenger and to those in authority among them, those of them who can search out knowledge of it," and it can also be translated as those of them who can investigate it, "they would have known it." They would have got the right knowledge of it. Chapter 4, verse 83. Now here it says, if any news of security or fear comes to them. News of security is some news which makes us happy or reassures us, or quite often it appeals to our existing views and prejudices. So it makes us happy. So we are likely to believe it. And news of fear is the opposite. Some report that something terrible is about to happen and you need to take some action about it, and it advises you to do something. And the Holy Quran says here in this verse that there are people who spread such news without confirming whether it is true or not. And the Quran advises that there should be some authority with the capability of investigation to whom people should refer anything they have heard. And that authority or body can look into the report and find out if it is true. We all know that this is one of the most serious problems in the world today, and we encounter it every day. And there are some voluntary groups in the world who dedicate themselves to investigating whether some information that has been circulated is true or a hoax or a misunderstanding. And this is what Islam advises, that there should be such monitoring groups or an authority. In connection with knowledge about the world, it is not only Muslims that the Holy Quran mentions, saying to Muslims, reflect on Allah's creation, remember Allah much while doing it, and teaches them to pray to Allah to grant them more knowledge. The Holy Quran does not only address Muslims in this context. It refers to all humans as benefiting from knowledge of the world. There is a group of verses which addresses all humans, which says, in that group, the Holy Quran says that the creation of human life, the relationship between the male and the female, the creation of the heavens and the earth, the diversity of the colors and languages of human beings, and what humans do, their different activities during the night and during the day. All of these are signs from God. But it adds that these signs can only be recognized by a people who think, those who are learned, and those who possess the power of intellect. And you can read this in chapter 30, verses 20 to 24. In some places, the Holy Quran gives the example of the use of ships for travel and transporting goods. And it says these are signs from God. And in a couple of other places, it mentions the sun and the moon as providing humans with a way of measuring years and measuring time. When the Holy Quran says that there are signs of God in all of these things that I've mentioned, it doesn't only mean that by just looking at these marvels of nature, by observing them, humans can reach the conclusion that there must be a creator and designer of all these things. Yes, that is also true, that they can reach that conclusion. But it also means that humans, by acquiring knowledge, practically benefit from all these creations. And this indicates that if you are willing to accept that there is a creator, then he is benevolent and merciful. The Holy Quran teaches us Muslims, that Allah has not limited His mercy to only those who accept Allah and worship Him, but that any people who strive to acquire knowledge, they benefited from their discoveries in their daily lives. So Muslims must accept the knowledge discovered by other civilizations as being a part of mercy of Allah. In the early history of Muslims, they had no hesitation in accepting the existing knowledge developed by the nations before them. Nations such as the Greeks, Romans, Indians, the Chinese. They accepted their knowledge even though these nations were at that stage idol worshippers or deniers of God. They were known to be that at that stage as regards their previous civilizations when they made all those discoveries. Now, in more recent history, when Western nations became dominant and they produced new knowledge in a vast range of fields, many of the traditional Muslim religious leaders in the Muslim world declared the new knowledge as the devil's work, the shaitan's work, which would lead Muslims away from Islam, and they instructed Muslims to shun and avoid it. In this way, Muslims deprived themselves of the knowledge that had come, the knowledge that had actually come due to the mercy of Allah on humanity. That was why that knowledge had come. But eventually the force of circumstances and the needs of the time compelled even those traditional Muslim religious leaders to drop their opposition to modern developments, and this is why we don't hear that kind of fatwa any longer. Another point to remember is that in order to benefit from Allah's creation, it is not merely sufficient for humans just to observe this creation and look at it passively. Humans have to study it properly, make detailed records of it, and apply their own understanding to the knowledge that they acquire. And in fact, the early Muslims did this. As I've already mentioned, the Holy Quran says in a couple of places that from the sun and the moon, humans get knowledge of how to compute years, compute time, and to do calculations. But when we look at the sun or the moon in the sky, we don't see a clock above us marked with hours and minutes. And we don't see a calendar in the sky marked with days and months, January, February, March, or in any other language. It was humans who decided that when the sun is at its highest, we will call it noon or 12 o'clock. And that the day should be divided into 24 hours. Similarly, human beings gave names to the months of the year, and they decided which year should be year one of the calendar. So this is how we have various calendars with different starting years. And these were human judgments made in accordance with what was useful and convenient for people. So humans have to apply their own reason and understanding in order to use the knowledge that is obtainable from nature for their own benefit. In one place, the Holy Quran issues this instruction to all humans, not only Muslims. It says, "Do they not see how Allah originates the creation, then He reproduces it? Surely that is easy to Allah. Say, travel in the earth, then see how He makes the first creation, then Allah creates the later creation." Chapter 29, verse 49. Now, because in other places in the Holy Quran, it tells people to travel in the earth to see how previous nations and civilizations were destroyed and see their ruins to learn a lesson from it. Because of those other verses, this instruction which I've read here has been taken to mean the same thing, that you should travel to see how earlier nations were replaced by later nations. But the words of this verse can also be taken to refer to the creation and development of life on earth. It says nothing about nations being destroyed for their evils. It says travel in the earth, then see how God makes the first creation, then Allah creates the later creation. Now, we see television documentaries in which the presenters travel to various parts of the world and show us, using modern technology, they show us the present day creation in nature of trees, animals and birds. And from this they draw conclusions about how this creation originated and what it might have been like in the past. The famous English scientist, and in fact he was a naturalist, Charles Darwin, went on a 5-year-long sea voyage, starting from England, going round the whole world from 1831 to 1836. And he observed living creatures and their remains. He recorded his observations and he collected specimens during his journey, particularly when he was going around the continent of South America. From his travel and research, he formulated his theory on the origin of life on Earth. So essentially, from seeing the later creation by traveling the Earth, he deduced what the first creation might have been like. So whatever one may think of Darwin's theory of evolution, and in fact even scientists have modified it from how Darwin presented it, nonetheless it is a fact that he traveled in the earth to see how the later creation had developed from the first creation. However, unfortunately, Charles Darwin was unaware of the principle taught in the Holy Quran that all mankind is equal and the best are those who show the best behavior. He was under the influence of the European colonial ideas of his time. And in line with those ideas, he came to believe that his theory of evolution proved that some races, and of course in particular his own race, that some races were superior to others physically, mentally, and morally by their very nature. That is what he deduced, which of course is plainly rejected by the Holy Quran. So while he produced a very great and revolutionary theory, yet he was misled in this way. So in the end, I'd like to say that may Allah enable Muslims to acquire knowledge in all fields of learning and to but more importantly or further, to shed light on that knowledge from the teachings of the Holy Quran. Ameen. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quranil Azim wa nafa'na wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim. Innahu ta'ala jawadun karimun malikun barurur rahim.